I'm Mary Lyons, the Wealth Woman.
I'm Eric Alexander with Benchmark Income.
Welcome to the Big Wealth Podcast. Today we have a special guest with us. It's Tony Lopes.
Thank you
Thanks for
for
joining
having
us.
me. Thanks
Yeah,
for having me on. I
absolutely.
appreciate it.
So, Tony is the author of a book which came out this summer, and that book is called Freedom at Risk: How to Protect Your Personal and Financial Freedoms. Did I get that right?
You got it. Spot on.
He is also the CEO and founder of Dirty Boots Capital. He is a GP for, I think, a real estate syndicator, if I'm getting this correctly. And he also consults with individuals who are thinking about getting into syndicated investments to help them understand what they should be looking at, how they should analyze it, and all that stuff that goes along with it. And then, as an added bonus, Tony retired at 44. So we're super
Nice.
excited to get that part of the story too.
And so as we get into the book, I was reminded I had a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and Mary's in the process of writing a book. I'm trying to map one out, and I was like, so John, tell me about the process of writing a book. Like, what does that look like? And he said, have you ever seen Princess Bride? And I said, yeah, I've seen it like 4,000 times. He says, so you're in the pit of despair, and the guy raises the bar, and the man on the table is screaming and writhing in pain. And he says, and now I've just sucked a year of your life away. He's like, that's what writing a book is like. And I was like, okay. And so every time I think about that and I see somebody that just wrote a book, I'm always like, okay, so you just sucked a year or two of your life away. Why did you do that? Like, what caused you to want to go through that pain?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get that question many times, and it really is. For me, it ended up being slightly more than a year of my life getting sucked away. But it was well worth it based on the feedback that I've been getting on the book.
Yeah.
Um, but I share with folks the book actually didn't start off as a book at all. Um, I don't have any kids, and so for me, I wanted to help my niece and my nephews understand this crazy world that we're living in from a lot of different perspectives. And so I wanted to provide something to them that would offer them the best chance for success in having a financially free life and a personally free life. And so I often, my thought was to write 20, 30 pages of how they
Hmm.
can do that, for my niece and my nephews. And so 20, 30 pages didn't sound like it was going to be that hard. And so I set off to doing that. And long story short, within no time, I was up to like 35,000 words. And I was thinking, this is no longer a 20, 30 page thing. This is a book.
Right.
And so I had to change course pretty quickly and find an editor, find a publisher, all that good stuff. Um, and so that's the course I went, and because I thought this was important enough to get out to the masses,
Yeah.
right? And so I share with folks that story because this book comes from a place of love, right? The words I put in here, the perspective and the time and the energy that's been put into this, it really started with trying to help my family. That's
Yeah.
really where it started, a place of love, trying to help them. And I think as folks read this, and based on the feedback I've received from folks outside of my family, um, that's what they're picking up on, right? They
Yeah.
get it. This is not a complex macroeconomic book that folks are going to struggle to read. This is a
Right.
book that I put together for college age folks and young adults, and adults are going to get a lot from it too. So it's not highly complex. I think they're going to read through it pretty quickly and get a ton of information and
Yeah.
value from it.
Well,
Yeah, and
and
I
I
know
think
it's got monetary theory in there, so you've got some big words, but so I can't wait to ask on that.
Well, I think what's beautiful about what you just said, Tony, is that it's come from a place of love.
Right.
And in my experience, and I think we've talked about this on the show before, but in my experience, when you are coming from a place of love, you're tapping into a space of abundance and creativity. And that's where all the best things in the world come from. Whereas if you're sitting there and you're thinking about scarcity or fear or any of that type of thing, that just creates limits on what you're doing. And so I just love philosophically that what you're tapping into here is about giving and creating a better life, because the more we do that, the better the world is. And the better the world is, the more of it ends up coming back, right? Even if that's not what you're expecting, there's just a basic law of reciprocity that happens when you put love out into the world. What you get back is what you're putting out there. And so I just love that that's the place that you came from as you were writing it.
Yeah, and as you mentioned in the intro, and I appreciate, I retired at 44, and so for me, all these different things. I mean, I don't need to be writing a book. I don't need to be, helping people with syndications or anything like that. I don't say that to be, braggadocious or anything like that. But once folks understand that, there's folks in the industry like myself and yourselves and others who are truly trying to help people live their best life. Once folks start to understand that, they can start making some real good changes in their lives.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful.
Outcome, and the outcome is not what you might have thought it would have been when you start down that path, right? Of, I just want to make better choices. It's like, well, you may not end up in the same space that you thought you were 20 years ago when you first started something, right?
Yeah. I work with a lot of folks who are going into their 50s, or already in their 50s, and they're starting to think about retiring, and they're not financially in a place where they can really retire. Or even if they start planning now, they're still looking at it saying, I'll probably never be able to retire. And so we start having this somewhat philosophical conversation, but it's a real conversation based on quality of life. It becomes less about money and starts becoming about quality of life. What do you want the next 20, 30 years of your life to look like, right? And that helps you frame out how much money or how much cash flow. I like to talk about things in terms of cash flow.
Yay!
Right?
I'm just going to say thank you. Yes.
Yeah, because
underline.
Yeah, it starts to, once you start to, helping people wrap their heads around the quality of life mindset, and then also wrapping their head around the cash flow mindset, things start to change in how they execute certain things. And it doesn't take long before they start seeing a lot of value in what we're doing. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
I want to talk about that quality of life thing. It was really interesting this morning. So I'm just going to share a personal story here. I was meeting with a client that I've worked with for a long time, and we've done the insurance portion of the plan, but not the investment portion of the plan. And so we've kind of helped big picture. And as they're getting, one of them has already retired. The other wants to know if she can retire this year or if she needs to keep working. And even that language, right, is language that they use. Can I, or do I need to keep working? And they were like, just tell us what to do so that we can have however much we need. And I said, well, do you even know what it takes to maintain a quality of life that you're excited about living? And the answer was no. And they said, well, just tell us what we need to do so that we can be responsible. And I said, well, I mean, if you both quit today, there's $200,000 a year of income, and you can guarantee that income depending on how you structure it. Is that enough for you? And they were like, well, no one's ever asked us that. And I was like, well, what are you doing with this other advisor that they haven't asked you that question? Like, how do you know what you're building toward right now if you don't know what lifestyle is comfortable? And I said, look, go through and figure out minimum acceptable lifestyle, and then figure out where you're comfortable, and then come back and tell me what you think, and then I'll tell you how to structure all of this, right? Because I can tell you, if we're just maximizing income with the assets that you have, here's the number. And they're like, well, is 200 enough? And I'm like, I don't know. For some people, for others, it's not. I mean, some people would be like 200, I'm ecstatic. And then other people are like, I can't live on that. And so, it was such an interesting question. But what I said is, and we say this all the time, money is just a tool. And it is there to help you build a life you are excited to live. It is not change your life to accommodate the money. The money is supposed to help you build the life. And so this idea of being deliberate and focusing on income and like recognizing that you don't have to work until you're 70 years old if you're smart about that income creation, I think is so important. But I want to focus on the book for a minute, because to me, everything that we're talking about when we talk about money and we're talking about living a life that you're excited about really comes back to freedom. And so when you and I met for the first time, and really you were talking about the book and what you're doing and why you're doing it, all of that was very interesting to me, because the focus for us is always finances, and that leads to freedom, but yours is actually freedom first, and finances is just a piece of that.
Correct.
And so I would love to have you kind of walk us through, what did you actually write in your book, so that people listening get that piece that gets them to say, okay, I'm going to go pick it up. I need to lean into this.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a lot about education, right? And so I created the book in 3 parts, really, just to quickly walk through it. The first part is really the education part, right? And so I broke down by chapter, first chapter being education, how the education system fails us, how that steals some of our freedoms by not educating us completely, right? About finances, it really teaches us about how to be a worker, right? A W-2 wage earner, really, is what it teaches us. It doesn't teach us
memorization, not critical thinking.
Exactly.
Is what I've seen.
You're right. Exactly. So the first chapter is about education and trying to help folks understand how that doesn't really teach us all that we need to know. The second chapter is about society and how society, ourselves, steals some of our freedoms from ourselves and from our neighbors, right? So it's in some ways it's taking the argument away from, oh, the politicians are bad, oh, the media is bad, oh, the education system is bad. No. Yes, that is true to some extent, but we, society, we also do it to ourselves, and we need to recognize that in order to correct it. Now, I'm not saying we got to correct it, across the board. We need to recognize it and correct it in our own little sphere of influence, right?
So what I'm actually hearing from you, Tony, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's really more about personal ownership for the way we're showing up.
Right.
Very much so.
Society and how that's affecting the people around us. Am I right?
Yeah. Every single one of these chapters, education, we have to take responsibility for ourselves and take action. If we didn't get the education we needed or we wanted, we have to go seek that out and seek those around us that can help, right? The same thing with society. You're absolutely right. We have to be accountable for the things in our own lives, right? And fix those things that we can fix, right? The same thing, the next chapter is about politics and the political system. And I don't care if you lean right or left or whichever, it doesn't matter. It's just understanding where you fit in the political atmosphere and take action and take accountability. If you vote one way versus another way, that's fine, but go out there, be engaged, take action.
And
exactly.
And only after understanding the issues, not blindly.
Exactly. And
on that,
we go into we do talk about the economy in the first part, how that can steal some of your freedoms, and a lot of folks I think will find that interesting to understand that better. And then I also talk about the monetary system and how fiat currency that we're under today in a huge credit bubble today can steal our freedoms away from us. So the first part of the book is really about educating and helping calibrate the reader in today's atmosphere.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We always sort of joke about inflation is like boiling a frog. Like you never really see it, and at some point it gets there, and I'm like, man, I'm the frog in this story, and that sucks. Like I'm always sharing that story, and then I'm like, crap, I'm the frog.
You're so funny, because that's exactly where the conversation typically goes, is folks will say, okay, Tony, great. So once I understand all that stuff in part one, okay, yeah, now I see the problems. What do I do?
Now I'm just depressed. Thank you.
Right. I don't want to leave them. And my editor and I, we did a very, I think a very good thing. And we deliberately went through the entire book, and we injected hope and opportunity into this Freedom at Risk book,
Good.
right? Because we did not want it to be doom and gloom. We did not want folks to be paralyzed with fear, right?
Right.
And so in part two, we speak to the how-tos, right? How to protect your personal freedom, how to protect your financial freedom. And we
Can I interject for just a second, Tony? I mean, here's what I think is really important. And this is true in your book, and I think this is what you've done. It's true, I think, in the way we talk to our clients, is that you have to get a handle on reality in order to do something about it.
Yeah.
And I think that especially, I mean, my generation was probably like the very cusp of the trophy, everybody gets a trophy kind of generation. I'm younger than Eric, so I'm just going to throw that out there. But
But
I
I'm
think
better
about
looking,
that,
so it kind of balances out.
oh, them are
I'm not
fighting
even going to
words,
argue with
Eric.
you. If you have video and you'd like evidence, feel free. Feel free to watch us on YouTube.
You'll find out that I'm lying.
So what I would say is, it's interesting to me to see that there are a lot of people who want to stay on the fluffy side of things.
Right.
That they're afraid that if they go too deep into what's really happening, that it will be paralyzing. But I think when it comes to personal ownership, we have a responsibility to understand what the facts are, because once you know what the facts are, you will know what to do. It will become apparent. But if you don't know what the facts are, it is really, really difficult to build a plan, to execute on it, to make sure that you're okay, that your family's okay. And so I love that you start by addressing the issues. But I also love the perspective, because it goes back to love and abundance, right? Where you're creating the hope and empowering people to do something about it, right? And that to me is key.
And I think a lot of the things we hear, in the media, or about politics, or definitely within the financial markets,
Yeah.
things are made so much more complicated than they need to be made, right? Eric, you kind of joked about, yes, I do talk about monetary policy in the book,
Yeah, that's right.
but it's done in a way that it's not confusing, right? My editor, who is not a macro economist,
Right.
it, she was able to work through it, and at the end of editing it, she was like, "Wow, I learned so much going through this process." So these things do not need to be as complicated as the Federal Reserve would like you to think they are, or as the politicians want you to think they are, right? So that they can be in power forever. Uh, we can learn stuff, and we can take charge of our own lives and do better for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of one of my favorite stories, the Stockdale Paradox, which is Admiral Stockdale and prison camp in Vietnam and all the whole story. But the Stockdale Paradox was, and I'm going to butcher it. Sorry, Admiral. Was basically, you have to confront the brutal reality of where you are, but also know that in the end you're going to win if you actually take action. Like, it's not just enough to go, well, this sucks, we're all going to die, well, let's go to the bar, right? It's like, okay, well, now that I know it's there, but I also know that I've got the power to go make it better, and to be able to have that ownership and take charge of it.
One of the things I do in terms of working with folks in my consulting role is, a lot of folks come to me already saying, I want to get into real estate. I want to buy a building 10 years ago. I wanted to do this 10 years ago. And one of the first things is, so why didn't you? Why didn't you take action?
Mm.
And so one of the things I try to do, and again, it almost, I'd be better served if I had a psychology degree over my engineering degree, is try to get into that conversation with folks to understand, why aren't you taking action? Or why didn't you take action?
Yeah.
Is it because you're paralyzed with fear in some way? And what's causing that? Is it fear because of lack of education? Is it because you have somebody humming in your ear saying you're going to fail or you're going to lose money?
Right.
Well, who is that person humming in your ear? Have they ever done any of this? Right now, I've done a lot of things in my life. I failed at some things, and I've been incredibly successful in other things. Right, so I can talk about things, but if somebody's humming in their ear who's never even tried any of this, that's the wrong person to listen to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Can
So
you
we
say
talk.
that again? Will you just say that one more time?
I don't know
For
if I
the
can, but
for the people in the back, if you have somebody humming in your ear that has never tried it,
Yeah.
that is the wrong person to listen to.
Right.
I mean, to me, that is I feel like, going into what you're talking about, fear. I actually think that the biggest fear, and Robert Kiyosaki talks about this in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the biggest fear is the fear of being different. Because we
Mm.
are a tribal society, regardless of how we want to see that. We like to be part of a pack, and we're afraid that if we do something different, that makes us weird and we will be excommunicated from our pack. And so we will minimize ourselves, we will minimize our capabilities, and we will minimize our lives to make sure that we aren't the weirdo that gets pushed out of the pack. Right. And I think sometimes we do this because other people weren't able to do it, and they're justifying their own failure by telling you you can't do it either. And it is so
Yep.
hard when you're in the middle of those moments to be able to acknowledge that that is what is happening. And that to me, like, you just hit it on the head. That's beautiful. Thank you for saying that.
no, you're welcome. I hope it helps the viewers out there. I mean, the intent of doing these podcasts and these videos is to add value to people's
Mhm.
lives and help them think either more clearly or differently, or provide some value to their lives. And
Right.
one of the recent videos I did with you mentioned Robert Kiyosaki. I did a video with Kim Kiyosaki recently, and so we're talking through these things and why people don't take action, and the education we help people with. You know, yourselves out there, myself, Kim, Robert, we don't need to be doing these things, but we, at the end of the day, we're the real teachers. We have done these things. We have been successful in our own right. And we're out there, and Kim puts it beautifully. Uh, what an incredible woman she is. Um, she just reemphasizes that we are the real teachers out there, and folks who want to get across the bridge to the other side of freedom, or financial freedom, or personal freedoms, they need to seek out those real teachers who are doing it.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. So talk about that part, because you talked about really part one is okay. Here's all the landmines. Here's how you're going to die. Here's what's going on, and then part two is really the like how do we go make that change? What are the things that you can do to go take control of your life? So kind of give us an overview of kind of what some of those things are. Is it let's
Sure.
all buy cryptocurrency and put all our money there and we're done, or is it slightly more complex than that?
Yeah, no, great. That's a great question. Yeah, so what I did was in the how-to section, which is part two, I split it out into financial freedoms, how to achieve financial freedoms, also how to achieve personal freedoms,
Okay.
because different people tick different ways and resonate with different things. So that's how I broke it out. So for some folks who resonate with the financial side of things, it's things like investing in everything from the traditional stock, bonds, precious metals, right? Things like that, but it's also looking at dividend paying stocks, right? Dividend paying assets where you can get some cash flow from those assets so that you can live your best life, right? So it brings that perspective to the table, where sometimes folks don't think about dividend paying stocks,
It's
right?
it's income focus, right?
It can be
Right.
income focused, exactly, and it all depends on where you are in the life cycle of things, right? If you're 20, you may not need that. If you're 50, you probably want to get a little more education on that piece, right? So we talk about stocks, bonds, precious metals. We also talk about cryptocurrency, right? I write about that in the book, not because I'm pushing crypto. I offer it as a thought in terms of an asymmetric play, right?
Yeah.
I introduced this concept of asymmetric plays where the downside is probably low, but the upside on an asymmetric play is can be huge, right?
So can
And
we
so,
can we can we talk about that for just a minute? Because I feel like this actually has come up a lot recently in
Yeah.
conversations, and specifically more prior to the bubble bursting on that side of things. But I do think this comes out a lot. Like, how do you know when you can take big risk? And one of the things that we always say is if you're going to do something like crypto, if you have your primary plan taken care of and you know your baseline is already good, you just need to determine how much money you're comfortable losing. And then that's what you go make your bet with.
Right.
Because if you lose it, it doesn't affect your plan at all because your plan's already taken care of. But if you hit it big, it has a huge impact on your plan. So I like hearing what you just said, just because I think most people don't think about their money that way. They
Yeah.
think, oh, I'm just going to, it's almost like roulette. I'm going to put it all in red and see what happens. And so there's much more of a gamble there. And I think if you're going to do things that could be considered a gamble, that you do it when you know you've got your baseline protected, that you've got a plan in place that's driving towards your goal. And then you take flyers on things that could potentially have huge impact if they turned out, but you already know it's not going to impact your ability to retire or take income because you've got that piece locked down.
or if you're younger, right? If you're 20 years old, you may be better positioned to take a risk on an asymmetric play, because if that doesn't pan out, you have the rest of your life to be able to build that portion of your portfolio back up. I'm not saying put everything on red, right?
Sure.
Put everything on that asymmetric play, but you may be better positioned as a young person to take on a asymmetric play more so than somebody who's 50 or 60 years old,
Well,
right?
and you're
Who's
probably
looking more
talking
for,
about very different dollar amounts at that point too.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. So there's no, so to speak, investment advice. It's about, the critical thinking part that we keep
Yeah.
coming back to, and trying to open the aperture for folks and give them some different things to think through, and then go back to their financial advisor and say, hey, I read about this in a book. Should we be doing something like that, right?
Right.
Um,
Well, and where does it fit? And I think a lot of times, and I love this word, this asymmetric play. The engineering brain is going, man, that's a great word. We're TM that thing. But so the idea of the asymmetric play, I think, gets pushed in when there's fear, because man, this hasn't worked so far. Popping into a new pair of shoes. If we're going to make this done, this is our ticket out.
mm,
As if we're holding this sort of Willy Wonka golden ticket, like all I need is this and we're going to go. But I think all of that is fear,
yeah.
because and I think if you're walking into that environment where this is my golden ticket, and if only this plays out, we're good, man, that is a red flag. You should walk away, because you're not going to make a rational decision on the other end of that.
Yeah. Whenever fear is involved, it's not a good thing. You got to get to a comfortable place. And so yeah, asymmetric plays are just one thing we teach about in the book,
Yeah.
right? We obviously talk about real estate, right, which a lot of people know about. We talk about it as a something that somebody can manage themselves, or something that can be a passive investment through a syndication, for an example, right? And so, even though I do syndications, I also have my own personal real estate that I personally manage, right? So I do all aspects of it. And in the book, I don't push one or the other. I'm not looking for folks to invest in syndications. I'm just merely looking to educate folks that that is another way to create a cash flowing income stream. We
Right.
also talk about businesses, starting a small business for yourself, right? If you're creative and can produce something of value, you can sell something on Etsy or Pinterest, right? Or if you're, there's folks I've met in my life, for example, a police officer who said, Tony, I love this stuff, but I'm a police officer. That's what I went to school for, and that's what I know, and that's my W-2 job. And I'm like, yeah, but you're so much more than that. I mean, who knows better in the community, um, what's happening with crime, right? And how to protect your home, right? And so could you start your own security uh, uh, company, right? Installing security cameras for homes, installing, advising people, going into people's home and advising them, well, your shrubs are too large because some people can, a burglar can get behind them and break into the window, or you should really have security cameras here because you're not on a main road and you might want to do, right? As a security officer, you bring a certain amount of credibility to the table. And if I was looking for somebody to install security cameras or help me with security of my property, I would probably call somebody who's a police officer, who has a
Plus, then you
business
have
on
a
the
personal
side,
relationship with a police officer. So if something ever does go wrong, you probably have a way to get in touch. I mean,
right?
that
So
so,
yeah,
so I love this because it's about leaning into your strengths. And there's an old quote, and I have no idea who said it, so I can't give the attribute, but it's a wise man creates more opportunity than he finds. And that's exactly what you're talking about, is using the critical thinking skills to find, like to create opportunities where you might not naturally think that there are any. But I think that's really, like, that's very helpful, because I think a lot of times people get stuck and they think, it's Eric, we talked about this recently.
Thinking
The
of
things that are your
that
area
card.
of genius come so naturally to you
Yep.
that you frequently don't realize that they're genius, because they're just innate. And you think, well, if I have this, everybody has this. And I
Right.
think sometimes it takes an outsider to say, but what about this amazing thing you do right here? And you're like, what? That's amazing. Oh, okay.
yeah.
And then there's opportunity from that if you lean in.
Yeah, there's some of the best advice I've received is not from from my own thought process, but also from others on the outside who can see things more clearly in myself than I can even see,
Yep.
right? I'm too close to it, right? One of the biggest mistakes I made in my career was actually self-managing my properties for too long. And I had a number of mentors who had shared with me, Tony, you got to get away from self-managing. Your core, your strength is not there, is not in self-managing properties. Your strength is in running the numbers, is in finding the properties, is in, creating the team to have a successful piece of real estate, right? That's what they saw in me. But just like you were saying there, I didn't see that in myself. I was downplaying it. I don't know if it was lack of confidence at the time or what it was, but I thought I knew better. And I thought, well, I'm going to, not listen to those mentors. I'm going to continue to self-manage. And, and that was a mistake. And, that's just life lessons, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
what you just said, I think, is really important too, because it's about the type of people that you have around you. I think so frequently our ego kind of blocks our ability to hear the things that we need to hear, right? And I think that it's more about protecting ourselves sometimes than it is about opening ourselves up to growth. And what I love about what you just said is that even though it took a while for you to come around to it, you had surrounded yourself with people who wanted what was best for you, who kept coming back to you and saying the same thing until you finally were like, oh, wait, I'm hearing what you're saying. And then you can make different choices about it. And I think so frequently what happens is we surround ourselves with people that tell us what we want to hear so that we don't have to grow, right? And that
Right.
sounds weird, but I think, it's much easier to say, oh, well, I can't do this because this happened in my childhood, or, oh, I can't do this because I don't know how. And it allows us to abdicate the responsibility of our own destiny. And this theme of freedom to me comes with a lot of responsibility, because you are free to do whatever you want, and who you surround yourself with impacts the way you think about that. And then how you lean into those relationships changes things too. If you're terrified, oh, I can't talk to this person because they know more than me, you're never going to learn, right? If it's about protecting your ego rather than like being vulnerable and open to the fact that maybe we don't know everything, and finding the people that know more, that's when you start to stretch yourself and grow. And I think that's actually the perfect segue to like the third piece of this book, which is, you called it the freedom paradox. So talk
Yeah.
to us about that.
Yeah, so after folks go through the first part of the book, which is really the education part, and then the second part, which is the how to protect your freedoms, right? The third part is a conversation on what I've dubbed the freedom paradox, right? And so a paradox, a lot of folks know paradox in terms of like the nuclear bomb paradox, right? That has some goodness to it, but it obviously has some badness to it, right? Having nuclear bombs has been a good thing for the world because it has warded off the nuclear holocaust, right? Because we know China has them, we know North Korea has them, we know Russia has them, they know we have it, right? And so everybody in those nations, those leaders, are afraid to use nuclear bombs because they know everybody else has them, right? So that's good because that prevents nuclear war. However, the bad part of it is if that nuclear weapon is ever used, millions and millions of lives are going to be lost, right? So there's this paradox with nuclear weapons, right? There's this goodness and there's this badness. And so I've dubbed this term, this freedom paradox, in the same way, right? We have freedoms that are great. And we can appreciate them. However, some of these freedoms also have a troubling and a concerning aspect to them. And so the example I'll offer is, we have an aging population right now, right? People are living longer, right? Into their 80s, into their 90s, which can be seen as very freeing, right? They're living longer, better lives, right? Due to advances in pharmaceuticals, advances in medical technology, things like that. They're living longer, living better lives, which is very freeing. However, with that comes the opposite side of the equation of badness. Badness in terms of as people live longer, as we have an older population, those social programs become more burdensome to the population, right? Because it's taking care of more and more people. Okay, this is why we have this problem with Social Security, right? And so as a result, taxes are going to go up, right? Income taxes, property taxes, things like that, to be able to afford these social programs for this larger population. We also have this concern that's been brewing. I'm not sure how many of the viewers, have heard or seen of this, but, we have a growing concern about food scarcity, right? Where is our food going to be coming from in 20 years? As we have this urban sprawl, as we have the farmland shrinking in this country, where is our food going to come from? And so, again, that's a bad aspect of, as people live longer, healthier lives, those are part of the population we're going to have to continue to feed for longer. And where's that food going to come from? And then also, we can talk about job scarcity as well, because not everybody who retires is going to drive off into the sunset and go live on a beach someplace or going to go volunteer someplace. Some of these older people are going to have to continue to work, and those jobs are going to be taken away from younger people who otherwise would be filling those roles and needing those jobs to be able to pay their bills and start families and the whole bit. So there's this freedom paradox that I've dubbed, which helps explain why it is so important for us to understand how our freedoms are at risk and why we need to protect them.
Well, it sounds like the book itself is going to go beyond just the personal freedom into how it affects society at large. And I can't remember, is it Spider-Man who said this? I mean, this is kind of a silly direction to go, right? But it was definitely a superhero of some sort that said, with great power comes great responsibility. Was that Spider-Man? Did I get right?
Nice.
Yes, I am so impressed with myself.
You're in the nerd crew now.
Yeah. Right. But I think that's kind of what you're talking about. We have the ability to make any choice. Well, not any. I mean, there are some consequences that happen pretty immediately if you make certain choices. But thinking about it, there are so many choices you can make that sometimes I think that leads to paralysis. And I think we have to recognize that not making a choice is also a choice, and that there are pros and cons for that as well. And I think this is such a good thing that you're doing, because whether people read the book and they're like, I'm all in, I buy everything you're saying, or whether they have the opposite reaction, I think the beauty of this is that you're challenging people to think critically about the choices they're making, and specifically about how that impacts their life personally and how it impacts society at large. And I think that context is so important for the decisions that people make on a daily basis, because when you don't have context, it's really hard to make good decisions. And I think that idea that you have to educate yourself and really ask yourself who benefits from this information right? Is it accurate? Where's it sourced? And really learn how to go through that process. I mean, I think that has lasting generational impact. And I think it's really great that you're doing this. And I appreciate you joining us today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you both for having me on, being able to tell my story and what I do and where I'm trying to help people. I appreciate your time and having me on today. I do.
Yeah.
So
Where can they find you, Tony? I'm assuming they can go buy that book anywhere books are sold, but where else can they find you?
Yeah, so thank you. I appreciate that. The best place for them to go is actually to go to my website called freedomatriskbook.com, because if they go there, they can purchase the book from there, but they also see that we have some freebies
Oh,
that we
nice.
give away for people who purchase the book, right? And it's very useful information, and if they buy one book they get certain types of freebies. If they buy three books, then they get even more free material, and if they purchase five books they get even that much more free material
Right.
from me. And so this is something, right? This isn't, the book is relatively cheap. The ebook is 99 cents. The book on Amazon is $14.99, so it doesn't break the bank, and it's a great little stocking stuffer for friends and family.
I was about
So,
to say Christmas is right around the corner.
yep, exactly.
love it. Well,
That's
thank you so
awesome.
much for joining us. Eric, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Economics with Eric wherever you use social media.
And if you're looking for me, I am at The Wealth Woman. See you next time.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you. Bye bye now.